You're tuned in to RBLR, the home of Tampa Bay's Reveler Sports.
4 seconds left. In front. Happy moment. The Tampa Bay Lightning have won the first Stanley Cup. And the Tampa Bay Lightning have won the Stanley Cup. Lightning strikes twice. The Tampa Bay Lightning win their second straight Stanley Cup.
Welcome back to RBLR Lightning. My name is Jake Ricker. Alongside me is my line mate, Joe Zamataro. Joe, we're out with one of our line mates today, as Matt Gannon. He had to go on the IR real quick because of due to illness, just like the Lightning had to deal with a little bit this week. But Joe, welcome back. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing pretty well. Yeah, that bug is definitely going around the Tampa Bay area. I'll tell you what, I was sick, 2 weeks ago, and Matt's got it now, and we know that's definitely been plaguing the Bolts a bit.
Well, hopefully everybody gets healthy, and we'll be able to get back to the good old-fashioned three-line show here relatively soon. But with that said, let's jump right into it because we do have a lot to talk about, even though it wasn't the best week for the Lightning, but nevertheless, we'll have all the news here for you guys. And starting with just some injury news and roster updates, the illnesses, we'll get to this more in the game recaps. We had a lot of those, as we mentioned at the open there. Bug kind of going around there. Vasi dealt with an issue early in this, but as of right now, everybody is back and accounted for. So it looks like everybody's getting back close to 100%. There's no big injuries to report. Balcers has been back on the ice again at practice, so looks like he is progressing even more. So good news on the injury front, even though the Lightning had some issues this week. And then we have to talk about Victor Hedman, who had missed the last game because he went back home waiting for his second baby to be born. So congratulations to Victor Hedman. I don't know if the baby's been born yet. I haven't seen a post about it or anything like that. But he did go home early for that game to be with his wife because they were expecting the baby very, very soon. So either way, congratulations to Victor Hedman there. Going right into the game recaps from that, we have the first one to talk about. It's the Chicago Blackhawks game where the Tampa Bay Lightning won that one by a final score of 4-1. Joe, this was the only win of the week for the Lightning, but we were kind of talking about before we started the show, it didn't feel like the smoothest victory in this one, even though they scored the 4 goals, really kind of control the pace of the game for the most part. But Chicago, I think it was they kind of got off to a early good start and it kept the game close a little bit until the Lightning were eventually able to pull away.
Yeah, this was definitely a game that was significantly closer than I feel that it should have been. Speaking on injuries one more time, it was also a game that saw Tyler Johnson. He was in warmups for Chicago and then ended up not playing because he too was sick. And he made warmups, but he didn't make the game. And the Lightning just didn't look like they were playing at 100%. You mentioned they had a lot of the play. A lot of possession time, but they just weren't. They didn't feel like they were connecting very well in this game.
Well, you look at the stats, right? 44% in the faceoff circle, 1 for 4 on the power play. They did go 4 for 5 on the penalty kill, but Chicago gets the opening goal. The Lightning did tie it, and then it was tied 1-1 going into the third period. That's when the Lightning did open up the scoring a little bit and be able to get to that 4-1 victory. So it was a close game for a majority of this, even though the Lightning seemed to have control of it, or at least were, in a position, always that striking distance away from opening up the floodgates, which they eventually did. I do think we need to give credit to Brian Elliott, who started in this game. He struggled for a little bit there and then had that long extended break where Vasi picked up multiple games. And then Elliott got this start against Chicago, like we talked about on last week's show. And I thought he played pretty well overall, only let up the 1 goal, obviously. And
even that goal that he let in.
Back.
Yeah, that goal that he let in was one that Seth Jones was basically on the doorstep, and it was, could have been tipped or hit off of a from a weird angle shot. It wasn't a straightforward shot that Brian Elliott faced there. He's a .962 save percentage on the night, and the one again that went in was kind of a strange bounce. So he did play pretty well. If you remember last week, this was the game that I was going to say would be unforgettable and unremarkable because the Lightning should just walk away with it, and that really wasn't the case. That Chicago team was truly battling all night long.
They absolutely were, and luckily the Lightning come away with the 2 points at the end of the day, and Elliott's play is a big part of that. But it was an interesting game, and it kind of felt like, well, if the Lightning struggled a little bit with Chicago for part of this game, how are they going to do against the two better opponents in the Minnesota Wild and the Winnipeg Jets? Also, this kind of game just goes to show you, by the way, Joe, it doesn't matter who you're playing. It doesn't matter the record. Anybody can win. This is the NHL. And you have to be ready for every single opponent.
It's that football saying that definitely applies to hockey. Any given Sunday.
Yep. You never know, and you got to give it your all. But the Lightning would travel to Minnesota for their next game in a back-to-back where everybody expected Andrei Vasilevskiy to be the starter, Joe. But then I don't know if you saw on Twitter at all, but there was mass confusion. Nobody knew what was going on as it was reported early that Brian Elliott was the one coming out, and then the team posted a graphic that had Andrei Vasilevskiy as the starter, and then other reporters were confirming that they had been told Vasilevskiy was the starter, and then some more reporters came out and said, no, it's Brian Elliott. So nobody had any idea what was going on.
I was in my car before the start of this one and even heard Michigan say that it was going to be Vasi starting.
Everybody thought it was Vasi. Michigan later said that, those guys, typically don't even pay attention to the Lightning coming out onto the ice because they already know who the starter is going to be. And then they slowly realized that it was Elliott in net. So what happened is Andrei Vasilevskiy came down with an illness late in this one and was unable to start. So that's why Brian Elliott was in net, but it was a last minute change. This was not planned originally. And a very tall task for Elliott to come in here on a back-to-back against a good Minnesota Wild team with no prep, really. He's probably ready, thinking he's going to ride the bench for this game and let Vasi take over. So a tough spot for Elliott, and unfortunately, this one does not go the Lightning's way as they lose this one by a final score of 5-1. They were really good in the face-off circle, though, 63%, 1 for 4 on the power play. They go 2 for 3 on the penalty kill. So not terrible stats when you look at them from a whole, but the score tells a much, much different story, Joe.
Yeah, and I wouldn't even fault Elliott for the most part. The Lightning just got 0 bounces this game. And the first goal, if I remember correctly, was a high slot tip. The second goal was something that was another bang play that Elliott just couldn't get to, and I'm pretty confident Vasi would have gotten scored on. The third goal was a tip as well, and those are really tough when you can get those redirections on net for the goaltender to save. And it wasn't like the Lightning were out of this game. Like you said, they were dominating the faceoffs and the shots on goal for the entire night. It was 35 Lightning, 33 Wild. The Wild got the bounces going their way, and the Lightning couldn't really get much momentum, it felt like, in this game to, outside of the power play goal to really get it going.
Yeah, and I agree with you in saying that I don't think much of this game was on Brian Elliott. I think he had some bad plays. There were some mistakes that he made for sure, and there's some that I'm sure that he would like to have back, but especially to have to come in, last minute on a back-to-back in such a tough spot, you can't really blame him that much after he played a pretty good game in Chicago as well. Really, the Lightning just couldn't get bounces to go their way, as you mentioned. This was Nick Perbix's homecoming, as he is from Minnesota. He had a ton of his family members and friends out there to watch him the game. I feel a little bad that Perbix, this was supposed to be kind of a homecoming game for him, and it did not go the Lightning's way. In fact, that first goal bounced off of Perbix's skate and into the back of the net. So unfortunate spot there for Perbix, but I heard he bought a lot of tickets to this game, Joe.
Well, he got that new contract, so he's got the money to buy a few seats for his friends and family. But I mean, if you look at his stats, he had 3 shots on goal. He had some good time on ice. He had almost 12 minutes of time on ice, and he was only a -1 on the night, and that is that one that that bounced off of him. So maybe you could even give him credit for scoring a goal if you want his friends and families to look at the silver lining.
That's true. I mean, technically he scored a goal. It just wasn't for the team we were hoping for. But Joe, I'll ask you this. Do you chalk this game up mostly to just bad luck and an unfortunate night? Or do you think this was more of the Lightning weren't playing well and some other bigger issues?
I will say this. Minnesota did not see the best of the Bolts. It was a back-to-back. As we've mentioned, that's going to be tiring out a lot of the players as well. And if your goaltenders are getting sick to the point of not being able to play, you have to figure that that's also going to affect some of the skaters. It's different when you're a netminder. You never get a shift off. You're constantly on the ice. If you're a player that's skating out and you're battling through illness, you might be able to get a few shifts in, take maybe a shift off to hit the bucket in the back and continue playing through some of that. It's just not quite as obvious as to who's sick and who isn't. For that matter, if you look, Nemesnikov didn't play in this game, and he said that he was a healthy scratch, but for all we know, he could have been sick as well. I think the Lightning were really battling the back-to-back and some illnesses here. So I'm not sure that I think this is one that you could almost write off and not particularly hold against the Lightning, just say it was an off night and kind of move on from there.
Yeah, and I don't want to sit here and just make excuses all day long. There were definitely some things that the Lightning didn't do well and they need to correct, which you're going to have in just about every game. But there were definitely a lot of factors working against the Bolts. Credit to the Wild. They came in and played a very good game. They took advantage of the situation and won the game, plain and simple. But there were definitely a lot of factors working against the Lightning. I think you're absolutely right. There's definitely a bug going around, and it is probably messing with some of the team right now. Hopefully it's mostly gone now as we get into these next games here in a little bit. But just not a great night for the Lightning. They also have a lot of bad luck in that building as well. The Lightning have only won twice in Minnesota, believe it or not. Now, that is also largely due to they only play there once a year because it's a West Coast team, and you only play 2 games total, 1 at home, 1 away. But it is interesting that the Lightning don't have a lot of success over there in Minnesota. There's actually a really interesting story that was told on the radio, Joe, by Eric Erlinson, that there was a Minnesota goaltender that took a loss to the Lightning, even though he never faced a shot. And the only reason he was in the game was because the Minnesota coach thought he was a little bit of a faster skater and he could get to the bench quicker for an extra attacker. And Eric was kind of calling this that goaltender's curse on the Lightning, and that's why they've never been able to win one there in Minnesota.
Man, that's got to hurt your personal stats and ego a little bit, just to be in the game for the last minute, and then end up getting intentionally pulled for the extra attacker to get the loss on your sheet.
Yeah, that's got to be frustrating for sure. It's not a pleasant way to take a loss, and I think
it's like adding insult to injury
on the Lightning. But at the end of the day, it's a tough one for the Bolts. They take the loss, and you have to move on and try to bounce back in the next game, which was against the Winnipeg Jets. And you keep in mind too, Joe, on this road trip, the Lightning are getting in late to all of these. I mean, these are West Coast games. And the Minnesota game ends late at night, and then they're jumping right on a plane to head over to Winnipeg to get set for that game. And they lose this one by a final score of 4-2. But the big storyline in this game was the penalties. Vasilevsky was back in this game, by the way, so he was good to go and got the start. But the penalties, Joe. Oh my goodness, the penalties. The Lightning took a total of 6 penalties in this game, which, you might even think, okay, 6, it was a lot, but, just a lot of kills, no big deal. No, they also took 2 5-on-3 disadvantages, and the Jets converted on both of those plays. And honestly, it was ultimately the difference in this game. I mean, the Jets go 2 for 6 on the power play, 2 of them being on those 5-3, but those 2 extra goals is what gives them the win at the end of the day. 4-2 win for the Jets. And John Cooper was very frustrated after the game. He basically said the Lightning gave it to the Jets on a silver platter, and the Jets took advantage of it, and the Lightning drop another 2 points on a tough road trip.
Well, that's a team that you have to be disciplined against. The Jets are very, very good, and Hellebuck's an outstanding goalie. I figured this would be another low-scoring game that would be a goaltender matchup like we saw against the Rangers a couple of weeks ago. And that really just wasn't the case. And like you said, it was because of the discipline of the team with taking penalties. The one penalty where the team was already shorthanded, then Nemesnikov sailed it over the glass for the delay of game. I mean, you could see the disappointment on everyone's face and the frustration. And that's kind of the way this whole game went, in a sense, where they still won their face-off percentages. They got more shots than the Jets did, but they didn't capitalize, and the Jets did, and they are a very good team. And I'm not going to blame this one on illness. It was just poor, I think, puck management and decision making, and obviously discipline.
Discipline's the biggest thing for me. I mean, they held the Jets to 20 shots. 20 shots in this game. That's low for an NHL game, and you're right. They outshot them 28-20. They were better in the faceoff circle at 57% to the Jets 43%. You go 0 for 4 on the power play on the chances that your own team got. You can't score there. And then you give up 2 huge 5-on-3s. The penalty kill, who's been really good for the Lightning all season long, can only do so much. I mean, a lot of these penalties, too, were like back-to-back or very closely. Some of them obviously right next to each other, creating the 5-on-3s, but even the ones that weren't, there's not much time in between these. So the penalty killing unit is constantly out there. That also takes your big players off there like Kucherov and Stamkos, because they're not on the penalty killing unit. So they get less ice time in these games, and discipline was a huge issue for the Lightning. And I can't really stick it on anybody specifically either, because a lot of different guys took penalties in this game as well. So I know some people might have been frustrated with some of the calls, but at the end of the day, when you're taking 6 penalties and especially 2 5-on-3s, there's an issue there, and that's something that's definitely got to be watched over the next couple of games here for the Lightning.
Well, it also, that we gave them 6 power plays. There was a lot more penalties than that, because there was a couple of 4-on-4s.
Correct.
During it, the total penalty minutes was 21 that the Lightning took, and I'm pretty sure Cirelli got a 5 in there for adding up those penalty minutes. But it's still, like you said, you can't do that against such a strong team. And there's a few goals scored. I mean, Cirelli got off to a pretty quick start with his goal at, it's at the 11-minute mark, almost 12-minute mark in the first period to give the Lightning the lead. But if you're not, I don't know, this was a very frustrating game for me personally to watch.
They took a 2-1 lead at the start of the second period. They were up 2-1, and then those 5-on-3s started rolling in, and that's when the Jets eventually took the 3-2 lead of their own, and then put one more on to make it 4-2.
Yeah, and look, the shots on goal were low for the Jets, but the shots that they had were pretty tough saves for Vasilevsky. The shots don't always, I say it all the time. I'm a stats guy. I think that stats paint a picture and give you overall trends. But if you face 20 really tough shots, that's way worse than a team that's putting up 40 perimeter ones.
Quality over quantity at that.
Exactly.
At that
and I think that's what this game was.
You want to have a lot of shots, but you also want them to be quality shots. You're absolutely right about that. Also, I need to mention this because I know Matt would be screaming at the top of his lungs. There was a shorthanded goal in this one. Lightning did give up a goal shorthanded. So I know that's been a big point for him, is that stop giving up the shorthanded goals. But that's something else too, Joe. I don't think there was one 5-on-5 goal for the Jets, because I believe the first goal they scored was 4-on-4. And then you had the 2 5-on-3 and then the shorthanded goal.
Yeah, so, you're right. Looking at the stats right now.
Yeah. And coming into that game, I believe the Lightning had not given up a 4-on-4 goal. They had Yeah, they hadn't given him a 4-on-4 goal, and they did that here. They gave him their shorthanded 2 5-on-3s. They hadn't given up any 5-on-3s either, so it was kind of a messy night for the Lightning, especially when you were not playing 5-on-5, and that's what ultimately killed them in this one, and why they are not able to pick up any points, and they drop another one in a tough road trip. So,
and it feels like almost like 2 steps forward for the month of December and the start of January here, 1 step back where they're giving up a lot of goals again.
Joe, it was a tough week for the Bolts, but you know what? You know what we can do to make ourselves feel a little bit better? We can head over to shop.rblrsports.com and check out the awesome merch that we got over there for you guys. Not just the Lightning themed merch, but the Rays, the Bucks, the Rowdies. Hey, the Bucks are going to the postseason, baby. They're getting ready to kick off their playoff run here. So got to get get your merch ready so you can go over there and support the Bucks for their playoff run. And don't forget, you can use code BOLTS for 10% off your order as well. Again, that is code BOLTS for 10% off your order. So be sure to go over there to shop.rblrsports.com.
Look good, feel good.
Absolutely right, Joe. Well, now that we talked about the games, let's go into our 3 stars of the week. And even though it was a tough week, I think we got 3 players, Joe, that stood out and still, had a decent week overall. We'll start with the number 3 star of the week, and that is going to go to Brian Elliott. Listen, some of the games were a little rough on him, especially that Minnesota one where he gave up multiple goals. But at the end of the day, he played good in Chicago, had to come in a very tough situation against Minnesota, and he still played, I think, decently well for the circumstances he was in, so he gets the 3rd star of the week.
Yeah, he earned it. He worked really hard. Again, a lot of the goals that went in that Minnesota game, you mentioned, I did admittedly forget it was Perbix that one bounced off of, and then the 2 high slot tips, those things are so incredibly difficult to save. He gave the Lightning a chance though in that game with playing strong enough to keep them in it. And in Chicago, he let in the 1 goal line deflection or tip, and outside of that, he was lights out. So he played very well this week, and like you said, through circumstances that were obviously less than ideal with that back-to-back.
Yeah, he's been a great backup force all year long. He had a little bit of a rough week, and I think he's bounced back well, and that's why he's earned the 3rd star. Next, we'll go to our number 2 star of the week, and that's going to be Anthony Cirelli, who hasn't been on this list too much because he had a late start to the season, but Cirelli, week for him, he gets a goal and assist for 2 total points on the week. We talked about Joe. He got off to that hot start in Winnipeg, getting the Lightning out to an early 1-0 lead. And ultimately, the Lightning don't win that game, but Cirelli playing pretty well, and it seems like he is getting back into shape here as he's now getting, a decent amount of games into the season.
I mean, Cirelli is one of those heart and soul type of guys, and he puts it all on the ice every single night. It is great to see him get rewarded for it, and it's typical Cirelli fashion with the way he scored this goal in the dirty areas, right in front of the crease. And if I can remember the replay or the play off the top of my head, did he go down to his knees in order to score that one? I think he ended up not being on his skates.
I think you think you're right. I think you're right.
I mean, it doesn't get more Cirelli than that to score while not being on your skates anymore. So, he gets that 2nd star for putting it out there in what was a tough week.
And then let's go to the number 1 star of the week, and it's a repeat offender. It's a guy who's been on this list a couple of times. It's Brandon Hagel, who he's had such a great year so far, and he has another solid week. He had a really good day against Chicago as well, his former team. He has a goal and 2 assists for 3 total points this week. He was a -3, but overall a good week for Brandon Hagel. Joe, for me, I've just been so impressed with him, and a lot of people were saying that trade was kind of a bust for the Lightning because he didn't score a ton of goals when he first came over, but I think he's really settled in with the Lightning and is taking on a top 6 role that I don't think a lot of people expected him to do.
I keep hearing rumors that he might hit 30 goals this season.
Hey, you're darn right he's hitting 30 goals this season.
Yeah, I mean he does play such a great game, and he could have easily had a hat trick in Chicago. He had a 4x6 to shoot at and hit the post on
That's
a
right. Yep.
on a Kucherov pass. He had the whole net and dinged one there. And there was another play in that Chicago game where he
That's
should have buried
nightmare,
one.
nightmare fuel right there.
Well, I mean, if he didn't get the late goal that he had, I mean, that would be one that keeps me up at night. So at least he can hang his hat on putting one in. But yeah, that was a full 4x6 that he ended up missing there. But yeah, going, getting, let's see, 3 points in the 3 games. It's it's not much compared to what we were talking about in the month of December for our number 1 star, but he still was very notable.
Hey, at the end of the day, he's the one that stood out the most in a rough week, and that's what counts the most here. Don't forget to follow us at RBLR Sports and let us know what you guys think as well. We'd always love to hear your thoughts. So if you would have put somebody else on this list, or if you would have changed up the order as well, let us know. We'd love to hear what you guys have to say. And again, you can follow us at RBLR Sports to check out those awesome graphics that we put out every week as well. So jumping into what is coming up here this week now, Joe, it's we're coming back for 2 home games and then back on another extended road trip here. The Lightning will be taking on the Columbus Blue Jackets tomorrow on Tuesday. We'll just say January 10th at 7 p.m. at Amalie Arena. And then they'll be taking on the Vancouver Canucks Thursday, January 12th at 7 p.m. at Amalie Arena. And then starts the road trip. It is a 5-game road trip going with St. Louis and then Seattle. And that Seattle game, Joe, is on a Monday, January 16th, and it's at 4 p.m. Eastern. It's a little bit of a weird time for that one, but I think a week that kind of gives the Lightning a chance to maybe get back in the driver's seat here after a rough week last week.
Yeah, so Columbus right now is a total of 2 points ahead of that struggling Chicago team that they just played. It is a team that I think after that 18-19 season, they really have taken it to Columbus every matchup that they get against them. So I'm hoping that is the sleeper of the week in terms of which game is going to be the easiest for the Bolts. And it's the first one. So that's coming up. I mean, that's what you want. Get a good start to the week. Vancouver has had a little bit of some struggles this season. They're right now sitting in their conference. They're in 12th. They're not playing great, but they're a team that can sneak up on you as well and get some wins. I think that will be probably the hardest game of next week until we see the Kraken.
Yeah, in the Kraken, they've been playing well. They had a little bit of a rough patch as well, but they've played well overall this season. And we talked about this, Joe, in the Chicago game. As that one showed, any of these teams can play well even if they're having a tough season. So it's not like these are free wins by any means, but definitely a little bit of an easier schedule on paper, at least for the Lightning, to start off the week. St. Louis is probably the big game that I'm circling. That's the start of the road trip. And they've been a decent team. They've had a little bit of a rough patch as well, but that's one game I look at for the Lightning to see if they can get a big road win against St. Louis. I think that'll be a huge a boost to their confidence as well. But what are you looking for on? We'll look a little bit further ahead as well. We'll talk about this more next week, but with this 5-game road trip, what are you looking for, Joe?
Well, I think you said it well. Get off to a good start. The team's struggled a little bit on these road trips. I want to have a little shout out to my buddy Dan, who is actually traveling to be at that St. Louis game in person. Hopefully that gives them the extra little oomph that they need to start this road trip off
thunder.
with.
I like it.
That's it. And the Kraken, that's going to be a tough one. If those that remember, that was where Pointer had his magical goal skating through more than half a team in order to flip one backhand. And towards the end of that, Yanni Gourde started getting pretty feisty with some familiar faces. And we'll see if that sort of animosity continues through this next game. So that's 4 p.m. on Monday for MLK. It'll MLK Day. little bit of an early one, and that'll be a fun one to break up the day a bit.
Well, I think it's good news if you're a Bucks fan as well, right? You're going to be able to still watch some of the Lightning game and the Bucks in the postseason as well for that. We talk about getting off to a good start, Joe, because later in the week, which again, we'll get more into this next week, but eventually you're going to be playing Edmonton and Calgary on this road trip, two very, very good hockey teams that they're actually both in the wild card spot right now. As I'm looking at the standings, the West standings are a little weird, Joe. I don't know if you've gotten a chance to look at them recently, but like Dallas is up there in first place right now. Then you got Winnipeg and Minnesota. Normally you have a Calgary, Edmonton, or Colorado up in those top three in either of those in the Central or Pacific, but still very good hockey teams in Edmonton and Calgary.
Yeah, there's a lot of parity when you're looking out west, and there's not a lot of teams that you can really sleep on. We're getting the road trips for the tougher teams out of the way, though. Getting through Minnesota last week and Winnipeg, those are two top ones. Now we have Seattle coming up, the Calgary Edmonton trip, and those again are. Have you guys seen that Connor McDavid guy? I mean, that's always going to be a game to watch. He's okay. He's got a little bit of speed.
It's all right. He's not too shabby. No, yeah, he's an unbelievable player that continues to amaze me at the things that he is able to do. Joe, one last thing I'll ask you here before we wrap things up here. We've mentioned a couple of times that Balcers is getting closer to a possible return here. Where would you like to see him mix in potentially, and who would you take out of the lineup? Because the Lightning are fully healthy right now for the most part when it comes to the main starters. But would you put Balcers in maybe this week if he's ready to go, and where do you think he could slot in?
All right, assuming that he's ready to go this week, I would change the lines a little bit. Overall, I would put Paul back with Stamkos and Killer again. And I know it sounds like a demotion, but hear me out. Put Cirelli back down on the third line to give those guys somebody that is a little bit more of a playmaker than I feel like Paul is. I don't feel like Paul is clicking as well on the third line just because of his style of play. Making that change, it'd be one of those. It would give a boost to the productivity, I think, of the third line. Something I said about going into January, I really wanted to see secondary scoring increase. And while we did get a goal by, who was it? Was it Pat Maroon last week? Or is that to start off? Let's see. It was, Pat Maroon to start off this past week with the Blackhawks. I really wanted to see Nemesnikov get going. And he's been someone that he absolutely lit up that preseason. And I thought that he was going to have, be on pace for like a 20 goal season based on that performance. He's not doing much out there. And then, that game against the Wild, he took a couple of really, I'm sorry, not against the Wild, against the Jets. He took a couple of really bad penalties that ended up hurting the Bolts. So if you're going to slot someone in, as critical as I've been with Belmar, I'd let Nemesnikov sit and think about some things and put Balcers in, drop Cirelli down, and then give that a whole big jumble to see what they can do to be more productive.
I'm right there with you with the putting him in maybe for Nemestikov's spot. Hopefully it sparks something for Nemestikov. And we've only seen Balcers in very limited action, but what we've seen of him, he's been really good. Maybe he can be a little bit of another spark for that bottom six and get those guys going again. So he is no longer in a red no contact jersey, and hopefully he'll be back very soon this week. Joe, I almost forgot, and we have to mention that this for this week, we had some of the NHL All-Stars announced, and the Lightning have had their first player selected, as every team has one player that is selected for the first part of it anyway. And Nikita Kucherov is heading back to the All-Star game in Sunrise this year. So a big congratulations, Nikita Kucherov, for getting this, I believe, his fifth All-Star selection. So congratulations to him. And then don't forget, guys, make sure you head over to the NHL's page and go vote for the rest of our Bolts to send them to Sunrise. It's a different kind of format this year. You can vote for 3 total players in each division, 2 skaters and then a goaltender. So, if you're asking me, I'm voting for Stamkos, Braden Point, and Andre Vasilevsky, but you can go out there and vote for any of the Lightning players that you want to. So don't forget to do that as well. Joe, who are you voting for?
Well, first, I just want to say to Nikita Kucherov, congratulations for getting in again. He's second in the league in assists and has, again, what we've been saying, he's quietly dominating this season and well-deserved. I really want to see the fans of Tampa vote Braden Point in. I think that he is really underrated overall in this league. But more than anything, I want to see a rematch. I want to see Connor McDavid. I want to see Braden Point, and I want to see who is fastest between the two of them.
Yes.
Let's get it on. Everyone go in and vote. I think you can vote up to 10 times a day. Get your votes in for some Braden Point action.
Correct. Yeah, 10 times a day, and you can vote for each of the divisions, but obviously the number one is the Atlantic Division, getting our Lightning players in there. By the way, Joe, have you seen some of the reported potential things that they might be doing at this All-Star game at all?
I haven't heard any reports. Hit me.
So this is coming from NHL News. They're a pretty good source, but All-Star skills speculation is ideas being thrown around between the NHL and NHL Players Association, including a dunk tank on the beach, a hybrid golf/hockey event, and this is my favorite one, and some type of game shooting frozen burgers at alligators. It doesn't get any more Florida than that. I don't know if that's 100% true or if that's really a thing that could happen, but I hope it does because that would be amazing.
That sounds like it's bringing Florida man to life.
It absolutely does. And who...
I was going to say, I really did like some of the more novel games that they had at the last All-Star game.
Yeah, in Vegas.
In Vegas. And it's what the Bellagio fountains, right? Where they were shooting the pucks onto the, I call them lily pads, if you will. I thought that was pretty cool. It was something completely different. And then the poker game where they were shooting, pretty long distances, the cards. It was something... It was novel. It was fun. So maybe this will be one of those environments too, where it's just fun spectacle to watch. It doesn't really mean anything to the players, right? Some of them kind of try, but it's mostly about them having fun. And this way, the fans aren't taking it too seriously either. Have some fun with some of these activities that they bring up. I like it.
Yeah, I think that's what the NHL is trying to do, is that each of these locations they go to, they have these special events that kind of fit to that location, which I love. We got that great moment at Stamkos last year when he was doing the Vegas one, when he was shooting the cards, and he was talking about how he's like, hey guys, it's cold out here. I'm used to this Florida weather. Let's get this done and over with so we can get back in there. Although I will say the only thing I didn't like about those events, they were all pre-recorded, which I get you got to do them early because you got to shut down the streets and all that, but hopefully if they do it this year, they do it live. I think it'd be a much better. That's probably hard to do, to get those players back and forth between the arena.
I think it'd be fun to have a poll for some of our listeners to come up with the most creative game that these guys play. Like maybe this mosquito slap with the stick. Whoever bats down the most.
Or, I like that one.
Yeah. See what some people can come up with.
All right, well, that's a good one. Maybe we'll get up a poll up here or soon at RBLR Sports. You can give us a follow, and then we'll see what our listeners can come up with for the most creative All-Star event, and we'll talk about it next week as that gets closer and closer. Guys, that's going to do it for us in this episode. Thank you guys so much for tuning in and listening to another edition of this RBLR Lightning podcast. If you guys could do us a favor, hit that subscribe button, give us that 5-star rating. We really appreciate it. It really means a lot to us and helps us out here on the channel. But thank you guys for listening. We'll see you guys in next week's episode. Go Bolts.
Thank you for tuning into this presentation by RBLR Sports. On your way out of the stadium, please remember to like and subscribe.